So I just watched David Fincher's new film, The Killer, starring Michael Fassbender, and I thought it was pretty good. David Fincher is one of those directors who you sort of know what you're getting every time you watch one of his films. I'm of course talking about the meticulous, obsessive attention to detail, especially when it comes to the camera work, blocking, and framing. The guy nowadays apparently averages 50 takes per scene, which is crazy. His films are also imbued with this desaturated colour palette and moody atmosphere, very fitting for the serial killers and psychopaths which typically take centre stage in his productions. And make no mistake, The Killer is no different. It is classic David Fincher in this regard. However, I think there is something else at play here. See, Fincher's films are usually these cold, detached, literal, and unsentimental pieces of art. However, The Killer actually struck me as rather meta, which I never thought I would be saying about a film made by this man, but let me explain. So in this movie, we follow Michael Fassbender's unnamed assassin. I think he has like 10 lines of dialogue throughout the whole movie, but we're constantly hearing his inner thoughts, which kind of like the movie itself, are rigid, uncompromising, unemotional. He's always repeating this mantra in his head about how empathy is weakness, and that as long as he plans everything to perfection, nothing can go wrong. I mean, he's kind of like a robot in this way, or at least that's what the film would have you believe at first. The man is a perfectionist. Does that remind you of anyone? Similar to Lars von Trier in his geniusly meta The House That Jack Built. I feel like here David Fincher is essentially employing what I'll call a director surrogate to explore some really interesting aspects of his legacy and career and creative process and public persona. The first 20 minutes of The Killer are basically just Fassbender, who is excellent by the way, waiting in a room to get the perfect shot on a victim. It's very Rear Window. We hear his philosophy on life, on killing, on precision. We see him eating McDonald's, doing yoga, and listening to the Smiths, whose music, by the way, plays throughout the whole film in darkly comical fashion, almost to the point where the film feels like a Smiths jukebox musical. But anyway, it's this really compelling opening, which would make a brilliant short film on its own. And I sort of see this as Fincher, or Fassbender, doing what he does best. This is his Social Network, or Seven, or Zodiac. It's his bread and butter. However, on this job, which should just be another routine assassination, the killer messes up. He botches it.
I botched that one. Oh, that's a botched job.
And I think we are safe enough to draw a comparison to David Fincher and his 2020 film which came out on Netflix, Mank, which let's just say was considered a swing and a miss by most critics and audiences. I think it's got like a 3.3 on Letterboxd. I think lots of people consider it Fincher's second weakest film, maybe after Alien 3. It could also be seen, as was the case with David Ehrlich's review, to do with Fight Club and how that film, despite its inherent quality, has sort of turned into a bit of a joke on the internet. I personally think it's about Mank though. That was a more personal film of Fincher's which showed him opening up a bit, and it kind of confused people. And I think The Killer mirrors Fincher here, being about this obsessive perfectionist who messes up on a job, perhaps due to emotion, and who is forced to retreat back into his world of precision and rigor. It's incredibly meta, which is, again, not a word I thought I would ever use to describe a David Fincher movie. I even saw one review online saying the film was Fincher stylishly roasting himself, which is pretty funny. I can see how someone might call this film, mid-tier Fincher. I personally don't think this is on the level of A Social Network, for example, but it is still pretty good. Like, there's a ton of great scenes in this one, two in particular which stand out in my mind. The first being a fight which takes place in a house, which is incredibly tense and brutish. Kind of reminds me of John Wick in that way. And then there's this brilliant bit with Tilda Swinton, who's obviously just such a great actress, where she's essentially analysing and breaking down who Fassbender's character is and what he's doing, which really does bring home that idea of Fincher roasting himself. I mean, the film somehow manages to be classic David Fincher, everything you could ever ask from one of his films is present here, while also having this very meta angle which essentially turns the thing into a dark, Charlie Kaufman-esque comedy. It's definitely one of the most interesting things I've seen all year. And also, I have to say this, it's so well edited. I feel like this channel has just turned into me basically talking about editing, but you have to admit, all of David Fincher's films are so well put together, and here with The Killer, editor Kirk Baxter absolutely nails it. This film really drives home the idea that often the best editing is the editing you don't even realise. It's similar to the profession of killing people for money in that way. This really is honestly the perfect film I think David Fincher could have made at this point in his career, and I'm very excited to see what he makes next. And that's going to be it. Please let me know what you thought of The Killer, and I'll see you in the next one.